Endeavor 5185 Air
These students are studying air traffic control.
A controller needs to memorize every point on that map and every point on this radar display.
It's a lot of information, and at first when you try and do it, it's really, really daunting.
It's part of a new program from the Federal Aviation Administration to fast-track students into a job in air traffic control.
And so any graduate of that program, instead of going through the academy, they can be hired into the agency.
Air traffic controller is at an all-time low in staffing. Now it's hit to a critical point where this can't be sustained. We currently have 10,800 certified professional controllers, where we need 14,633.
That's roughly a deficit of 26%. The shortage is not new and has been around similar levels for the last decade. But recent events, despite not necessarily errors of air traffic control, are calling more attention to the importance of filling these jobs.
The investigation continues into that deadly collision between an American Airlines jet and a Blackhawk helicopter near Reagan National Airport.
Air traffic control tower staffing deemed not normal, but it's not deemed unsafe under FAA guidelines.
The NTSB said there was one person handling helicopter and airline traffic, when typically there would be one for each. The Federal Aviation Administration has limited flights in congested areas like New York because the number of controllers are insufficient.
On blue sky days last year, so days with no weather in the system, 68% of our delays were because of air traffic control restrictions. We have a delay in New York every single day, no matter what the weather is, because they're simply understaffed.
Another concern is the aging systems used by the FAA.
We have computers, and I kid you not, today in 2025 that are based on Windows 95 and floppy disks.
After an outage in 2023 that grounded thousands of flights, the FAA determined that 51 of its 138 systems that provide things like communications are unsustainable and need to be modernized. CNBC explores how the FAA got so behind on hiring air traffic controllers and technology, and what it's doing to fix it. The air traffic control shortage has been a concern for decades.
We know that the Federal Aviation Administration is facing a shortage of experienced air traffic controllers, and we cannot afford to ignore the safety needs of the aviation system.
It's been a long stemming problem. It's not just one thing, it's been multiple things over a decade. We've been having staffing numbers reported incorrectly. There haven't been hiring goals that have been met.
The FAA Academy in Oklahoma City is where the majority of ATC workers do their initial stages of training.
During the COVID shutdown, it stopped the entire Oklahoma City Academy. Some of them don't come back because they don't have a job at that point and are not getting paid. And we lost 500 trainees in 1 year because of it.
But just getting into the academy can be difficult. The FAA has strict requirements for who can apply. You can't be over the age of 30 unless you have prior experience, which raises the limit to 35. You must speak English clearly, pass the Air Traffic Controller Specialist Skills Assessment Battery Pre-Employment Test, also known as ATSA. You must also pass an annual medical exam. If you have high blood pressure or diabetes, you cannot be an air traffic controller.
It's a stressful job, it's rigorous, the training at the academy is rigorous, depending on which option you go through. Over the last 8 years, we've had 146,000 applicants, and we've hired 7,905 of those. So less than 10% of the people that apply for the job actually make it to the academy and then graduate to go out into the field.
Many applicants also drop out before they reach the end of their training.
So last year in FY24, our goal was 1,800 controllers. We hired 1,814 of folks that will go through the academy, but we'll lose 35% of those at the academy. We'll lose another 20% once they get in the field on the job training. So we don't net 1,800 controllers. Traditionally, people will get through the maps, they'll get through the written test, and it's when they get into the simulation and the actual practicality of the job that we lose most people.
The interest starts out high, and then as you see the stresses, the pressure, the continuous learning, the millions of decisions that you have to make every day, and you have to be perfect. So that begins to detract people as time goes on.
Additional challenges include the mandatory retirement age of 56. Wages and hours are also something to consider for those applying.
When you first graduate the Oklahoma City Academy, your pay will be anywhere between $45,000 and $50,000. You could range on that pay for up to a year or longer, and that's where it becomes extremely difficult. It depends on the level of facility that you're at for what your pay will be. Most air traffic controllers are at very entry-level positions, and then your pay continues to increase throughout your tenure, throughout your seniority. And we have so many young people right now, that's why their pay stays on the low end and the need to retain that group.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced that trainees at the FAA Academy would receive $5 more an hour to help with recruitment. He also posted on X saying, 3 years after graduating from the academy, you can make an average of $160,000 a year. In 2023, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said the average annual wage was $137,000 a year.
Most air traffic controllers, at least 41% of the facilities are forced on mandatory overtime, meaning they only have 4 days off in an entire month, and they work 60 hours inside that work week.
There are various facilities out there that are working overtime, but there's a lot of facilities that are not. And so we have 313 facilities in the country. Not every facility is as understaffed, so to speak, as some, so it just depends on where you are.
President Trump has alleged, without evidence, that DEI hiring practices at the FAA were to blame for the fatal collision in D.C. last January.
The bar for becoming an air traffic controller has never moved. I've been in since 2005, and the standard that I went through is the same standard that we use today. 70%, again, is passing the academy. We haven't lowered it regardless of your race, nationality, origin. Nothing has changed in the air traffic world for the hiring of the air traffic controllers.
In 2023, the FAA announced the Enhanced Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative, which allows qualified schools to provide equivalent training. The air traffic program at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University was just certified in 2024 and is the 4th school in the program.
I would love to be an en route controller at Atlanta Center. That's the goal, that's the dream.
The school's been around for nearly a century, and it has over 260 students studying air traffic control.
A controller needs to memorize every point on that map and every point on this radar display. So that's the very first thing our students do, and it's the very first thing a trainee would do in the FAA, and that is memorize the map.
Professor McCormick worked in air traffic with the FAA for 33 years. He now runs the air traffic program at Embry-Riddle.
One of the things with air traffic control is that you have to love the challenge. You have to love the complexity, and you have to love the volume, and you have to learn to work as a team in a control tower.
Students must go through a 4-year baccalaureate program that teaches them how the system works. Then they apply the knowledge in a simulated environment.
Air France 1008, turn right heading 240 and climb maintain 12000.
There are different types of towers a controller can work at. To understand, let's take a look at how it works. The National Airspace System, or NAS, is 29 million square miles with more than 45,000 flights each day. A commercial flight traveling from one airport to another can be handed off to many controllers. As a plane pushes back from the gate, a ground controller taxis you to the runway. Then tower control handles the aircraft that are taking off and on final approach, typically from the surface to 2,500 feet and a 5-mile radius of the airport. Then terminal radar approach control, or TRACON, controllers take over until the aircraft is about 18,000 feet and handed off to an en route controller. In the U.S., there are over 263 air traffic control towers, 146 TRACON, and 21 en route centers.
I feel that tower is a lot more difficult than TRACON. That just comes from it being a little bit more stressful. You're really controlling those aircraft that are in the pattern, that are up in the air, and you want to get them home safe.
In the tower lab, students are in the simulator looking out onto airport runways, clearing aircraft to take off and land. In the room next door, students are acting as pilots flying those planes. Just down the hall is the TRACON lab, where controllers take over communications as planes leave the airport.
TRACON is a little bit easier. You are really focusing on specific rules and minima to keep those aircraft separated.
The number of aircraft any single controller will be handling is going to vary depending upon the geometry of an airport, how many taxiways there are, how many runways there are, and it's going to depend upon how busy an airport is. So during the lower traffic periods, it could be as little as 5. During the peak traffic periods, it could be 30 or 40 or more.
McCormick says that the recent FAA certification has grown interest in the program. After graduation, pending they pass tests like the medical and ATSA exam, these students can now go straight into a job instead of the FAA Academy, where on-the-job training will continue.
It typically takes from 1 to 5 years, depending upon how complex and how busy an air traffic control facility a student would go to in order for them to reach fully certified status.
Another issue the FAA has been dealing with is aging technology.
In many of our facilities, we don't have a standardized level of equipment. Every facility, because of the long-term funding issues that we've had, it's been very stop and go.
Air traffic control has been around for 90 years. In the early days, there was no radar or radio communications. The first 3 stations opened in 1936 in Newark, New Jersey, Chicago, and Cleveland. The use of radar came along in 1950. Automation arrived in the 1970s, when controllers were able to see an aircraft's identity, altitude, and other data. The Airport and Airway Trust Fund was also established in 1970, which is the primary source of funding of the FAA today. It collects excise taxes on airline tickets and other users of the NAS. In the mid-2000s, the FAA introduced a multi-billion-dollar initiative called the Next Generation Air Transportation System, or NextGen, to modernize the NAS over more than 2 decades.
NextGen was more of an idea encompassing many upgrades to the system. The goal is to fund the system properly, to reform the funding system, and to bring the actual equipment to the controllers that's needed.
Many of these updates were supposed to be implemented by 2025, but the agency has had mixed success in reaching these goals, citing the pandemic as a big cause for the delays.
So our main issues right now are telecommunications. It's a very old and antiquated system running through copper lines. It needs to switch over to some level of fiber optic. Outside of that is then our what we call a notice to airmen system, and that's to give pilots information all around the country and around the world about obstacles or issues near and around airports that are important to them. When they don't have that information, most airplanes can't fly. We've had to shut down the entire aviation system for hours before because that broke. So we need to invest there.
I just think it's some outdated technology that needs updating. And obviously, as you have outdated technology, you're going to have failures, things break over time. And so again, it's just getting things up to where they need to be.
491 heavy or
One modernization the FAA is starting to roll out is electronic flight data strips. Controllers have used paper strips for decades to keep track of flights. Electronic strips will allow the information to be updated in real time to better handle fluctuations in traffic. The update has started rolling out, but won't be finished or in airports like JFK until 2029.
This system continues to be modernized. It's just not scaled and funded at the level that's needed.
When you talk about modernization, you look at some of the foreign countries and the equipment that they have compared to what continues to be talked about, the 1950s, 60s, 70s equipment we have. One, look at the size in comparison to where we are versus them. And then obviously we have a different process here in the United States on how we procure this equipment and how we get the equipment in. So there's a lot of differences, but we're still the safest ANSP in the world.
The simulators we saw at Embry-Riddle were brand new, and experts say that new technology cuts down the required training time.
Not everything we have is 1950s technology. It's not. Matter of fact, our TSS is our tower simulations that we just rolled out in 95 different facilities around the country. That is 2021 technology that we're using. State-of-the-art simulation. I mean, you know, it's high definition.
The FAA also said that AI could be used in moving the technology forward.
I absolutely think we'll embrace AI. And I don't want to say in the control tower that we're going to use AI to start controlling airplanes, but when we look at some of the technology for training, I think AI absolutely will be a component. We use it on the admin side all the time for various things. I mean, that's how we get reports pretty fast and, you know, analyze data. We use AI.
The FAA recently started testing Elon Musk's Starlink terminals at several facilities around the country as part of the solution. The FAA doesn't expect to have sufficient ATC staffing for 5 to 7 years.
Under Secretary Duffy's leadership, we put out a surge call, and we've had over 10,000 applications for the positions themselves. About 7,500 of those have been referred for testing. So, you know, obviously our focus is to get controllers, the best and the brightest, into the academy and get them out to the facilities as soon as possible.
Insufficient staffing coupled with lack of new technology will continue to challenge its efforts to keep up with flight demand.
Traffic is up and traffic continues to climb. Well, with that, you're going to have more complexity, more volume in the different areas. So it's going to take more folks to do that.
If you like to tell people what to do and they have to listen to you, it's an ideal person for an air traffic controller.
As the airspace gets more crowded and new technology becomes available, some wonder if technology could replace air traffic controllers altogether.
The key is the controller. Technology may change, aircraft performance may change, but what doesn't change is the professionalism and the excellent service that air traffic controllers provide.
Number 5185, Air Center, descend and maintain 13,000, Jackson altimeter 29.